My name is Natalie, and I'm 29 years old. I was standing in my small Portland apartment on a rainy Tuesday evening, staring at my phone like it had just slapped me across the face. The group text from my mother glowed on the screen with words that made my stomach drop. Natalie, after careful consideration, your father and I think it's best if you don't attend Paige's engagement party this weekend. Your presence might create unnecessary tension. I read it 3 times, each time hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't feel like a knife twisting in my chest. Then the doorbell rang. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If this story resonates with you, or if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your own family, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself even when it costs you everything. Trust me. What comes next will show you exactly why some family dynamics are more toxic than we ever want to admit, and how one engagement party became the catalyst for exposing years of lies, favoritism, and betrayal that nobody saw coming. I grew up in Beaverton, a comfortable suburb of Portland where appearances mattered more than authenticity, and keeping up with the neighbors was practically a competitive sport. My parents, Donald and Margaret, ran their household like a corporation where love was distributed based on performance metrics, and my younger sister Paige always exceeded expectations while I perpetually fell short. Paige was 3 years younger than me, but from the moment she could walk, she was the sun around which our entire family orbited. She was the beauty queen with the perfect smile, the homecoming princess with the sparkling crown, the daddy's little angel who could do absolutely no wrong. I was the bookish one, the introverted one, the difficult child who always seemed to disappoint them simply by existing. The pattern established itself early, and never wavered. When I got accepted to Columbia University with a full academic scholarship, my parents congratulated me with the enthusiasm of someone commenting on the weather, then immediately shifted the conversation to Paige making the cheerleading squad. When I graduated summa cum laude 4 years later, they showed up to the ceremony but left halfway through because Paige had a sorority event that apparently couldn't be missed. When I became a pediatric nurse at Oregon Children's Hospital, one of the most respected hospitals in the state, my father said, "That's nice," and changed the subject. When Paige became an Instagram influencer posting photos of her breakfast and calling it content, my parents bragged about her to everyone they knew, as if she'd discovered the cure for cancer. The incident that got me uninvited from the engagement party happened 3 weeks earlier at a family dinner at my parents' expensive home in Beaverton. The house was one of those modern colonials with the perfect lawn and the 3-car garage, the kind of place that screamed success to anyone driving by. We were all gathered around their formal dining table, the one my mother only used for special occasions, with the good china and the crystal glasses that cost more than my monthly rent. Paige had insisted on a family dinner to announce her engagement to Brett, her boyfriend of 6 months, who worked as an investment banker and drove a BMW and checked all the boxes on my parents' list of acceptable son-in-law qualities. I had congratulated them genuinely, because, despite everything, I didn't wish unhappiness on my sister. I smiled, I raised my glass, I said all the right things. But then my mother turned to me with that pitying look she always gave me and asked about my own dating life, and I mentioned that I'd been on a few dates but nothing serious. Paige couldn't resist. She leaned back in her chair with that smug smile I'd seen 1,000 times and said, "Well, not everyone can land a catch like Brett. Some people have to settle." The table went quiet. I felt everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to either take the insult or make a scene. I chose neither. I simply said, calm as anything, I'd rather be single than settle for someone who makes me feel small. That's when Paige burst into tears. Actual tears, streaming down her perfectly made-up face, her hands covering her eyes as she sobbed like I'd physically attacked her. She claimed I'd called Brett inadequate, that I'd insulted her choice, that I'd ruined her special moment out of pure jealousy. Brett looked confused, opening his mouth to say something, but my father cut him off. Donald slammed his hand on the table and pointed at me with the kind of rage he usually reserved for business dealings gone wrong. "You can't stand to see your sister happy, can you, Natalie? You've always been jealous of her." My mother rushed to Paige's side, wrapping her arms around her like she was protecting her from a monster, and looked at me with genuine disgust. "You always ruin important moments. Always. Why can't you just be happy for your sister? I tried to explain what Eid actually said, tried to point out that I hadn't insulted anyone, but nobody was listening. They never listened. My younger brother Garrett, who was 24 and usually stayed out of family drama, just stared at his plate like he wished he could disappear. I grabbed my purse, excused myself, and left while Paige continued her performance and my parents comforted her like she was the victim of some terrible crime. I sent an apology text that night, not because I believed I'd done anything wrong, but because I was so tired of being the villain in their story. Nobody responded. 3 weeks of silence followed. No texts, no calls, nothing. Then came the group message uninviting me from the engagement party. Garrett texted me separately about an hour later with a message that broke my heart because of how resigned it sounded. Sorry sis, you know how they are with Paige, just lay low for a while. I sat on my couch in my tiny apartment that suddenly felt even smaller and let the familiar ache wash over me, that feeling of being an outsider in my own family, of never being enough, of always being the problem. I'd felt it my whole life, but somehow, it never got easier. I wasn't expecting anyone that Tuesday evening. I'd come home from a 12-hour shift at the hospital, still in my scrubs, my hair pulled back in a messy bun, my face bare of makeup. When the doorbell rang, my first thought was that it was a package delivery. Maybe something I'd ordered online and forgotten about. I opened the door and felt my breath catch in my throat because standing there, looking uncomfortable and troubled, was Brett, Paige's fiancé, the man who was supposed to marry my sister in 6 months. He was dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, his hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. "Natalie," he said, "can we talk?" I stood there frozen for a moment, trying to process why my sister's fiancé was at my door when I'd just been uninvited from their engagement party. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, that whatever he wanted to say would only complicate an already complicated situation, but curiosity won out over caution. I stepped aside and let him in. He walked into my small living room and looked around like he was trying to figure out how to start, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders tense. "I overheard what really happened at that dinner," he finally said. "Paige told your parents you called me inadequate, that you said she was settling, but that's not what you said at all, is it?" I shook my head slowly, surprised that anyone had actually paid attention to my actual words. "No, it's not. I said, I'd rather be single than settle for someone who makes me feel small. I wasn't talking about you or about Paige. I was talking about my own standards for my own life." Brett nodded, his jaw clenching. "I know. I was there. I heard you. And I wasn't offended because you weren't talking about me. But after you left, Paige twisted your words to your parents. She made it sound like you'd attacked both of us, like you'd tried to ruin the whole evening out of jealousy." He paused, meeting my eyes. "And I didn't correct her. I should have, but I didn't, and I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air between us, unexpected and genuine. I sat down on my couch, gesturing for him to take the chair across from me, my mind racing with questions about why he was really here. He sat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, looking more troubled than I'd ever seen him. "I need to be honest with you about something," he said. "I've been having doubts about Paige." The words came out like a confession, like he'd been holding them in for so long they'd become toxic. He told me he wasn't the shallow finance bro everyone assumed he was, that he'd grown up in a working-class family in Eugene, that he'd worked 3 jobs to put himself through the University of Oregon, that he'd built his career from nothing. He told me he valued authenticity above almost everything else. And that was something he found lacking in Paige. He'd noticed how she treated service workers, dismissing them like they were invisible. He'd overheard her talking behind her friends' backs, saying cruel things with a smile. He'd seen her true nature but had ignored the red flags because she was beautiful and charming, and everyone told him how lucky he was. The engagement had happened fast, he admitted. Only 6 months of dating before he proposed, caught up in the whirlwind of her attention and his own desire to settle down. His mother had expressed concerns about the quick timeline, worries he'd dismissed because he thought she just didn't know Paige like he did. But now he was starting to realize his mother had seen something he'd missed. "I saw you at the hospital once," he said quietly. About 2 months ago. My nephew was admitted with appendicitis, and you were his nurse. You were so kind to him, so patient. You made him laugh even though he was scared and in pain. You treated him like he mattered, like his feelings mattered. And I remember thinking that was real. That was genuine. He looked up at me with something like desperation in his eyes. I'm starting to realize I'm marrying the wrong woman. But I feel trapped. The engagement party is in 3 days. Both families are involved, deposits have been paid, invitations have been sent. How do I get out of this without destroying everything? I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to help him because he seemed genuinely distressed, but another part of me recognized how inappropriate this entire conversation was. Brett, I can't be your therapist. I can't tell you what to do about your relationship with my sister. That's something you need to figure out on your own. I stood up, signaling that this conversation needed to end. I appreciate you coming here and telling me the truth about the dinner. I appreciate you believing me. But you need to make your own decisions about your life. I won't be the reason you break up with Paige, and I won't be pulled into the middle of this any more than I already am. He stood too, nodding slowly, looking disappointed but understanding. You're right. I'm sorry for putting this on you. I just didn't know who else to talk to. He walked to the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, you deserve better than how they treat you. Then he left. And I stood in my empty apartment wondering what the hell had just happened and why I felt so disturbed by the entire encounter. Something felt off about his visit, some undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. I pushed the thought away, deciding to focus on my own life and forget about the engagement party I wasn't invited to anyway. I picked up my phone and texted my supervisor, offering to take a weekend shift at the hospital. At least at work, I knew my value. 2 days later, I was working an evening shift at Oregon Children's Hospital, checking on a 6-year-old with pneumonia and trying not to think about the engagement party happening across town. It was around 7:30 on Friday evening when my phone started vibrating in my pocket with an intensity that made me excuse myself from the patient's room and step into the hallway. I pulled it out to find my screen exploding with texts and calls, dozens of notifications piling up faster than I could process them. Garrett was calling frantically, so I answered. Nat, you need to see this. It's everywhere. His voice was breathless, panicked. What are you talking about? I asked, my heart starting to race with a dread I couldn't name. Check Instagram, check Facebook, check literally any social media. There's a video of Paige with another guy. And it's bad, Nat. It's really bad. I opened Instagram with shaking hands and immediately saw what he meant. My feed was flooded with shares of the same video, posted from various accounts, each one tagged with Portland area locations and wedding-related hashtags that made sure it reached maximum visibility. The video showed Paige at a trendy bar, unmistakably her with her distinctive blonde hair and the designer dress I'd seen her post about 2 weeks ago. But she wasn't alone. She was with a man I recognized as Cruz, a fitness influencer Shed mentioned as just a friend several times. Except friends don't kiss like that. Friends don't have their hands all over each other like the world might end tomorrow. The video showed them in a full makeout session at the bar, completely unaware they were being filmed, completely unconcerned about who might see them. The timestamp on the video showed it was from 2 weeks ago, well after Shed gotten engaged to Brett, well within the boundaries of what anyone would call cheating. The Portland influencer community was small and incestuous, and the video was spreading like wildfire. I scrolled through the comments, my stomach churning as I saw hundreds of people weighing in, sharing their opinions, tagging their friends. Then I saw Paige's response. Posted just minutes ago. Shed put up an Instagram story claiming the video was out of context and that people didn't understand what they were seeing. But her next story made my blood run cold. Shed posted a photo of herself crying with a caption that said, "When your own family betrays you out of jealousy, some people can't stand to see others happy." My phone rang again. It was my mother. I answered to hear her voice, sharp with accusation and fury. "Are you happy now, Natalie? Are you happy that you've destroyed your sister's life? How could you do something so vicious? How could you stoop this low?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Mom, what are you talking about? I didn't leak any video. I'm at work. I just found out about this." But she wasn't listening, just like she never listened. Don't lie to me. Who else would do this? Who else is jealous enough, bitter enough, to sabotage your sister's engagement party? Your father and I always knew you resented Paige, but we never thought you'd go this far. She hung up before I could defend myself. Text messages started pouring in from extended family members, all of them accusing me, all of them furious. My Aunt Lorraine, who had always thought liked me, sent a message that said, "How could you do this to your own sister? You should be ashamed of yourself," my cousin Ivy wrote. "You're dead to this family, I hope you're proud of yourself." Even Garrett, who usually stayed neutral, sent a tentative message asking, "Nat, did you have anything to do with this? I need to know." I texted back immediately, firmly. "I had nothing to do with this. I've been at work all day. I have witnesses. I didn't even know about the video until you called me." But I could feel it, that familiar pattern settling in like an old coat that never quite fit right. I was the scapegoat again, the convenient target for everyone's anger, the person who could be blamed when things went wrong. The engagement party was supposed to be happening right now, I realized. 150 guests at my parents' country club, champagne and catered food, and a celebration that was probably imploding in real time. I checked Paige's Instagram again and saw Shed posted another story from what looked like the country club bathroom, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, claiming she was the victim of a calculated attack by someone who's always hated me. The implications were clear even if she didn't say my name directly. I thought about Brett and wondered how he was handling this, whether he was devastated or relieved or some complicated mixture of both. He hadn't been answering Paige's calls according to Garrett's follow-up text. The engagement party was in question, chaos reigning, and somehow it was all my fault, even though I'd been taking care of sick children all day and hadn't touched social media until 10 minutes ago. I stood in that hospital hallway, in my scrubs with my badge hanging around my neck, surrounded by the sounds of beeping monitors and worried parents, and realized that this was it. This was the moment where I either kept accepting the role of family villain, or I fought back. I looked at my supervisor walking past and made a decision. I had 2 days off starting tomorrow. I was going to find out who actually leaked that video, and I was going to clear my name, even if it meant burning down everything my family thought they knew. I called in a favor from my friend Deanna, who worked in IT and had more tech skills in her little finger than I had in my entire body. We met at a coffee shop Saturday morning, and I showed her the video that was still making rounds on social media. She pulled out her laptop and within minutes was examining metadata I didn't even know existed. The video was originally posted from a burner account created 3 days ago, she explained, pointing at strings of code that looked like gibberish to me. The account posted this one video and then disappeared completely. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They didn't want to be traced. But there was information in the video itself, details about when and where it was filmed. I could see the name of the bar in the background on a logo behind Paige and Cruz. It was called Vesper, a trendy cocktail bar in the Pearl District, known for expensive drinks and Portland's young professional crowd. I thanked Deanna and drove straight there, arriving around noon when the lunch crowd was just starting to filter in. The bartender was a guy in his late 20s with sleeve tattoos and a carefully maintained beard. I showed him a photo of Paige on my phone and asked if he remembered her. His face lit up with recognition immediately. Oh yeah, she was a regular for a while. Her and that guy she was always with. He pointed at Cruz in another photo I showed him. They came in every Thursday night for weeks. Very affectionate, very into each other. I assumed they were a couple. My heart sank even as I felt vindicated. How long was this going on? I asked. He thought about it, wiping down the bar as he spoke. Started maybe 3 months ago? They'd sit in that corner booth, order expensive wine, stay for hours. They weren't exactly hiding anything. Multiple people probably have photos and videos of them from different nights. Your sister wasn't discreet about it at all. I thanked him and was about to leave when a woman sitting at the end of the bar spoke up. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. Are you asking about the video that's all over social media? Her name was Shelby, she told me. She was in her mid-30s, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and an openness that made me trust her immediately. I know who posted that video, she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. My pulse quickened. You do? Who? Shelby pulled out her phone and showed me text message screenshots from her boyfriend. My boyfriend works with Brett at the investment firm downtown. He mentioned something interesting a few weeks ago. Brett had hired a private investigator to follow Paige because he suspected she was cheating. The PI got footage of her and Cruz together. Brett held on to that footage for weeks, and then 3 days ago, he posted it anonymously. He wanted to expose Paige but didn't want to be the one who looked like the bad guy. He let the video leak so he could cancel the wedding without people thinking he was the villain for leaving her. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Brett had come to my apartment, had confessed his doubts, had made himself seem like a confused victim who didn't know what to do. But all along had been planning this, had already hired the PI, had already had the evidence, had been plotting to expose Paige in the most public, humiliating way possible, and when it all came out, when the blame started flying, had let it land on me. I felt betrayed in a way I hadn't expected. Id thought Brett was being genuine when he visited me, thought he was struggling with a difficult decision, but had been manipulating the situation all along. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked Shelby. She looked uncomfortable but determined. "Because my boyfriend mentioned that Brett had visited his fiancée's sister earlier in the week. I put 2 and 2 together when I saw your sister's posts blaming family. I figured you were probably taking the heat for something you didn't do, and that didn't sit right with me." She showed me more screenshots, messages between her boyfriend and his coworkers discussing Brett's plan, joking about the drama that was about to unfold. The evidence was clear and damning. I took screenshots of everything Shelby showed me, thanking her profusely and buying her lunch as inadequate compensation for her honesty. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot and tried to process everything. Brett had used me. Had come to my apartment to establish himself as conflicted and sympathetic, probably knowing that when the video dropped, he could point to that conversation as evidence that Head tried to handle things privately. My family had blamed me immediately, without evidence, without even asking if I'd been involved. They'd accepted the narrative that I was jealous and vindictive, because that's the role I'd always played in their story. And somewhere across town, an engagement party was either happening or falling apart, and I was supposedly the villain who'd destroyed it all. I looked at the time. It was almost 2 in the afternoon. According to the invitation I'd seen before being uninvited, the engagement party was supposed to start at 6. I had a decision to make. I could send this evidence to my family and let them deal with it, clearing my name from a distance and staying out of the drama. Or I could go to that party, uninvited and unwelcome, and confront everyone with the truth in person. The old Natalie would have chosen the safe option, would have avoided conflict, would have tried to smooth things over quietly. But the old Natalie had been uninvited from her own sister's engagement party for daring to defend herself. The old Natalie had spent 29 years being the family scapegoat, and I was done with her. I started my car and drove home to change. I was going to that party, and I was going to make sure everyone heard the truth. The Oswego Lake Country Club was exactly the kind of place my parents loved, all old money elegance and carefully maintained exclusivity. I arrived at 6:15, fashionably late but not so late that I'd miss the important moments. I was still wearing my work scrubs because I hadn't had time to change, and honestly, I didn't care anymore about meeting their standards for appropriate attire. Security tried to stop me at the entrance, a young guy in a suit checking names against a list on his tablet. "I'm sorry, Mom, but you're not on the guest list." I pushed past him with more confidence than I felt. "I'm the bride's sister. There's been a misunderstanding." He called after me, but I was already through the doors and into the elegant ballroom where my sister's engagement party was somehow still happening despite the scandal that should have canceled it. The room was stunning, I had to admit. White roses everywhere, gold accents catching the light from crystal chandeliers, a champagne tower in the corner that probably cost more than my monthly salary. About 150 guests were scattered throughout the space, all dressed in cocktail attire, all trying to pretend like everything was normal even though I could see them whispering to each other and glancing at their phones. Paige stood near the center in a designer dress that probably cost thousands, her makeup perfect despite the crying she'd supposedly been doing, playing the role of brave victim with practiced ease. Brett stood on the opposite side of the room, looking miserable and distant, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and his jaw clenched tight. My parents were working the room like politicians, all fake smiles and forced laughter, pretending their family wasn't imploding. The moment I walked in, conversations stopped, heads turned. I watched my mother's face go from confusion to horror to rage in about 3 seconds. She rushed over, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, her voice a harsh whisper. "What are you doing here? You're not welcome. You need to leave right now." My father appeared beside her, his face red with anger, already gesturing toward security. "Get her out of here! This is a private event." Across the room, Paige saw me and let out a dramatic gasp, her hand flying to her chest, tears immediately springing to her eyes like she had them on standby. "How dare you show your face here after what you did? How dare you?" She started crying those perfect tears that never smudged her mascara, and several guests moved to comfort her, shooting me dirty looks like I'd physically attacked her. I stood my ground, pulling out my phone with steady hands even though my heart was racing. "I didn't leak the video," I said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "And I can prove it." I held up my phone, showing the screenshots Shelby had given me, the metadata from the video, the text messages discussing Brett's plan. The video was posted from a burner account created 3 days ago. I was at work when it was posted. I have witnesses, time cards, security footage if anyone wants to check. I didn't even know the video existed until after it was already viral. I turned to look directly at Brett, who had gone pale. But Brett knew about it. Brett hired a private investigator weeks ago. Brett got this footage and held on to it, then posted it anonymously so he could expose Paige without looking like the bad guy. The room went completely silent, every eye turning to Brett. He stood frozen, his glass halfway to his lips, his face a mask of guilt that confirmed everything I was saying without him having to speak a word. Paige's head whipped toward him, her tears stopping as quickly as they'd started. "Is this true?" Her voice was sharp now, all the victim act dropping away. Brett didn't answer immediately, just stared at his drink like it might save him. "Is it true?" Paige screamed, storming across the room toward him. He finally looked up, meeting her eyes with something like resignation. "I couldn't marry someone who was cheating on me," he said quietly. "I needed proof. I needed everyone to see what you really are." The room erupted in shocked murmurs, guests pulling out their phones, probably texting their friends about the drama unfolding. But Paige surprised everyone with her response. Instead of breaking down or apologizing or showing any hint of shame, she exploded with rage. "You ruined everything. We had a plan." The words came out before she could stop them. And I saw the moment she realized what Shed just revealed. Brett looked confused. "What plan?" Paige was spiraling now, her carefully constructed image cracking like a mirror struck by a hammer. "You were good on paper. You had money and status and the right job and the right look, and marrying you was going to save my brand." She was yelling now, not caring who heard her, all her practiced sweetness replaced by raw fury. I was losing sponsorships. My follower count was dropping. I needed something to make me relevant again, and a wedding to a successful investment banker was perfect content. Meanwhile, Cruise actually makes me feel something. Has exciting and fun and real, and you're just boring and safe and convenient. The room was dead silent now, everyone staring at Paige like they'd never seen her before, which I suppose they hadn't. They'd seen the performance, the carefully curated persona, but never the reality underneath. Brett's face had gone from confused to disgusted. "You were using me? This entire relationship was for content." Paige realized she'd said too much, her hands flying to her mouth, but the damage was done. Then she turned on me because of course she did. I was the easiest target, the familiar scapegoat, the person she could blame when her own life fell apart. "This is your fault. All of this is your fault. If you weren't such a jealous, pathetic loser, none of this would have happened." She started listing all the ways I'd supposedly failed as a sister, as a daughter, as a human being. She brought up every insecurity Shed ever noticed, every vulnerability I'd ever shown, and weaponized them in front of 150 people. She called me a failure for not being married yet, for working as a nurse instead of having a more impressive career, for living in a small apartment instead of owning a home, for not being pretty enough, or thin enough, or successful enough by her standards. The attacks were cruel and public, and designed to humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered in my parents' social circle. I waited for my parents to intervene, to tell Paige to stop, to defend me even a little bit. Instead, my father stepped forward with his hands raised like he was trying to calm a wild animal. "Everyone, please, let's just calm down. This is a family matter. We shouldn't be airing our problems in public like this." My mother moved to Paige's side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, despite the horrible things Shed just said. "Natalie, you've done enough damage. Please leave." They were still protecting her, still prioritizing her feelings over everything else, still treating me like the problem. My younger brother Garrett finally found his voice. "Mom, Dad, Nat didn't do anything wrong. You're blaming her for something she didn't even do." But they shut him down with a look, that same look that had silenced him his entire childhood, that warning that said if he kept defending me, he'd become a target too. I felt something break inside me. Some last fragile hope that my family might choose me for once, that they might see me clearly and decide I was worth defending. That hope shattered, and in its place came a clarity I'd never experienced before. I addressed the room full of guests. These people who'd watched my sister verbally abuse me and my parents enable her. "I need you all to hear this, because I'm only going to say it once. I've spent 29 years being the scapegoat in this family. I was blamed for things I didn't do, punished for defending myself, and treated like I was worthless because I didn't fit the image my parents wanted. I was uninvited to this party for making a comment about my own dating standards that had nothing to do with anyone else. I was blamed for leaking a video while I was at work saving children's lives. I've been called jealous and bitter and pathetic by people who should love me unconditionally. I looked directly at my parents. I came here tonight to clear my name with evidence, not to cause drama. But the drama was already here. It's always been here. You just needed someone to blame for it. And I was convenient." Brett stepped forward, and for a moment, I thought he might defend Paige, might try to salvage the situation. Instead, he looked at me with something like respect. "I owe you an apology, Natalie. I used you. I came to your apartment knowing I was about to drop this bomb, and I let you think I was just a confused guy with doubts. I should have been honest with you about what I'd already done. You didn't deserve to take the blame for my actions." Then he turned to Paige, his face hard. "And you don't deserve anyone's loyalty. Not mine, not your family's, not anyone's. The engagement is off. The wedding is cancelled. I'm done." He walked out of the ballroom with his head held high, and I watched him go, feeling a complicated mixture of anger at his manipulation and gratitude for his final honesty. The room erupted in chaos, guests murmuring and gathering their things, clearly ready to leave this disaster. My mother tried to stop Brett, calling after him, but he didn't turn around. Paige let out a scream of frustration that sounded more like rage than sadness. My father pointed at me one final time. "Get out of here, Natalie. You're no longer part of this family. Do you understand me? You're dead to us." The ballroom descended into chaos after my father's declaration. Paige was having a complete meltdown, not the pretty kind where a girl cries delicately into a tissue, but the full-body sobbing that came with hiccups and smeared makeup and an inability to form coherent sentences. My mother tried to console her while simultaneously trying to convince departing guests that everything was fine, that this was all just a misunderstanding, that the wedding was still on despite the groom having just walked out. My father was on his phone, probably calling his lawyer or his accountant or whoever rich men call when their carefully constructed lives start falling apart in public. Several guests were clearly uncomfortable, gathering their coats and purses, whispering to each other as they headed for the exits. But others stayed, and some of them surprised me by approaching not my parents or Paige, but me. My Aunt Lorraine, who had sent me that accusatory text just yesterday calling me shameful, walked over with her husband trailing behind her. She looked embarrassed and guilty. "Natalie, honey, I owe you an apology. I should have asked for your side of the story before I accused you of something so awful. I'm sorry." Her apology felt genuine, her eyes actually meeting mine, instead of looking away in shame. My cousin Ivy came next, the one who'd said I was dead to the family in her text message. I was wrong. I jumped to conclusions because that's what everyone else was doing, and that's not fair to you. I'm really sorry. More relatives approached. Ones had witnessed years of the dynamic between me and Paige, between me and my parents, and were apparently finally ready to acknowledge what they'd seen. A family friend named Mrs. Harriet Walsh, An older woman who had known our family for decades took my hands in hers with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "I've watched your parents treat you unfairly since you were a little girl. I tried to say something once, years ago, and your mother stopped speaking to me for 6 months. I should have tried harder. I'm glad you finally stood up for yourself, even if it cost you." The person I was most grateful to see was Garrett. My little brother had slipped away from our parents and was walking toward me with his jacket already on, his expression a mixture of anger and determination. "I'm leaving with you," he said firmly. When I started to protest, to tell him he didn't have to choose sides, he shook his head. "Nat, I've watched them do this to you our whole lives, and I've been a coward. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to become the next target. But I'm done. You're my sister, and you deserve better than this." We left the country club together, walking past my parents who were too busy trying to salvage Paige's image to notice us leaving, past the remaining guests who watched with varying degrees of sympathy or judgment. Garrett drove because I was shaking too hard to trust myself behind the wheel, and we ended up at a 24-hour diner near downtown Portland, sitting in a booth with terrible coffee and comfort food neither of us could really eat. "Tell me everything," I said to Garrett once we'd settled in. He looked older than his 24 years in that moment, tired in a way that came from carrying secrets for too long. He told me he'd always seen the favoritism, had watched our parents celebrate Paige's mediocre achievements while dismissing my actual accomplishments. He told me about the pressure he felt to be perfect, to not rock the boat, to stay in his lane and accept whatever role the family assigned him. He confessed something that shocked me completely. Had been thinking about dropping out of law school for months because he hated it, because his real passion was art and graphic design. But he was terrified of what our parents would do if he admitted he didn't want the career they'd planned for him. "If I drop out, I'll become the next you," he said quietly. "I'll be the disappointment. The problem child, the one they talk about in hushed voices at family gatherings." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Then maybe we should be disappointments together." Garrett told me more family secrets that night, things I'd never known because I'd always been kept at arm's length. Our father's business was struggling financially. He'd made some bad investments and was quietly borrowing money from friends to keep up appearances. Our mother had been on anxiety medication for years but hid it from everyone, terrified that admitting she needed help would shatter her image of perfect control. Paige's influencer career was failing badly. She'd lost most of her major sponsorships over the past year because brands were moving away from her demographic and toward more diverse, authentic voices. She was making almost nothing from social media anymore, which explained why marrying Brett had seemed so important to her. The engagement was supposed to be her comeback content, her way of staying relevant when her actual personality and talent weren't enough to carry her brand. "That's why she's with Cruz on the side," Garrett explained. "Hez got more followers than she does, and she's hoping some of his audience will follow her too. Everything she does is calculated for maximum exposure." We talked until 3 in the morning, making plans and promises. Garrett said he was going to drop out of law school at the end of the semester. He had some money saved up and a girlfriend who supported his dreams and a portfolio of graphic design work he'd been building in secret. He was going to move in with his girlfriend and pursue what actually made him happy, even if it meant our parents disowned him too. We made a pact to support each other no matter what, to be the family for each other that our parents had never been. When he dropped me off at my apartment as the sun was starting to rise, he hugged me tighter than he had in years. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself tonight. I know it cost you, but you were amazing." I went inside and finally let myself cry, great heaving sobs of grief and relief and exhaustion all tangled together. I cried for the family I'd wanted but never had. I cried for all the years I'd spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I cried because standing up for myself had been the right thing to do, and also the hardest thing I'd ever done. The next morning, my phone was filled with messages, but not the kind I expected. The story of the engagement party disaster had spread through Portland's social circles overnight. Several of Paige's influencer friends had posted cryptic messages about fake people and true colors, clearly distancing themselves from her now that the scandal had reached critical mass. Paige herself had posted a long Instagram story that I only saw because Garrett sent me screenshots. In it, she painted herself as the victim of everyone, claimed that Brett had manipulated her, that I had sabotaged her out of jealousy, that the video had been taken out of context, that Cruz meant nothing to her, that everyone had betrayed her when she needed them most. The comments on her post were brutal. People were calling her out for cheating, for using Brett, for attacking her sister in public, for refusing to take any accountability for her actions. Then, my phone rang. It was my mother, and I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice was sharp and demanding. "Natalie, you need to fix this. You need to post something on social media apologizing to your sister and explaining that you misunderstood the situation." I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "I'm not apologizing for telling the truth." My father's voice came on the line, meaning I was on speakerphone. "Then you're cut off. No more family events, no holidays, no contact. You're choosing to destroy this family, so you can live with the consequences." I took a deep breath and said the words I should have said years ago. "Dad, you cut me off emotionally when I was a child. This changes nothing, the only difference is now it's official." I hung up before either of them could respond and immediately blocked both their numbers. I kept Garrett's number active and blocked everyone else in my family. I was done being their scapegoat. I was done accepting blame for their dysfunction. I was done trying to earn love from people who had decided I wasn't worth it decades ago. I thought the worst was over after the engagement party disaster. I thought that standing up for myself and walking away would be the end of it, that my family would move on and leave me alone to live my life in peace. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the party, I learned that some people don't accept defeat quietly, that some families see your boundaries as challenges to be conquered rather than limits to be respected. The first sign came when Paige launched a full-scale social media campaign against me. Shed lost followers after the engagement party disaster, dropping from 50,000 followers to around 30,000 as people unfollowed her in droves, but she still had an audience, and she decided to weaponize them against me. She posted a series of Instagram stories over several days, each one carefully crafted to paint me as a villain. She called me jealous, vindictive, manipulative, a liar who'd been trying to ruin her life for years. She posted old photos of me from high school when I'd been awkward and overweight, photos I didn't even know she had, with captions about how jealousy can make people ugly inside and out. She never used my full name, but she didn't have to. Everyone who knew our family knew exactly who she was talking about. The attacks got worse when she posted a video tearfully explaining her side of the story, a complete fabrication where she claimed I'd always been obsessed with destroying her happiness, that I'd befriended Brett specifically to turn him against her, that I'd somehow orchestrated the leaking of the video even though I'd proven I hadn't. Her followers ate it up, filling her comments with support and sympathy, calling me names and making threats that ranged from disturbing to genuinely scary. Some of them found my Instagram account, which I'd kept private, and sent me direct messages telling me I deserved to suffer, that I was a terrible person, that they hoped bad things happened to me. I reported and blocked them, but more kept coming. Then my mother did something that crossed a line I didn't even know existed. She called Oregon Children's Hospital where I worked and asked to speak to the administration. She told whoever answered that she was concerned about my mental stability, that I'd been harassing my family, that I'd displayed erratic and disturbing behavior recently, and that she worried I might not be fit to work with vulnerable children. The hospital took the complaint seriously because they had to, and I was called into my supervisor's office for a meeting I never saw coming. My supervisor, a woman named Patricia who'd always been supportive of me, looked uncomfortable as she explained why I'd been called in. "We received a call from someone claiming to be your mother expressing concerns about your mental health and your fitness to work here. I want you to know that we don't take such complaints lightly, but we also know your work record is spotless. You're one of our best nurses. Can you help me understand what's going on?" I had to sit there and explain the entire family situation to my supervisor, had to detail the engagement party disaster and the years of dysfunction that led up to it, had to show her evidence that I'd been at work when the video leaked, had to prove that I was mentally stable and not a danger to the children in my care. It was humiliating and exhausting and invasive in ways I couldn't fully articulate. Patricia believed me and dismissed the complaint, but she warned me that if more complaints came in, she'd have to escalate it to HR for an official investigation. I left that meeting shaking with rage at my mother for weaponizing my career against me. But she wasn't done. A few days later, my landlord contacted me with a notice that made my stomach drop. My father had co-signed my lease 2 years ago when Id first moved into my apartment because I hadn't had enough rental history to qualify on my own. Now he was removing himself as a co-signer, and according to the terms of my lease, that meant I either needed to find a new co-signer within 30 days or move out. This apartment had been my home for 4 years. Id painted the walls and arranged the furniture and made it mine, and now I was being forced out because my father wanted to punish me for not apologizing to Paige. I called him, using Garrett's phone because Head blocked my number, and confronted him. "You're trying to make me homeless because I stood up for myself." His response was cold and unapologetic. "You made your choice. These are the consequences. If you just apologize to your sister and make things right, we could resolve all of this." I hung up without responding and started looking for new apartments, knowing that finding a new guarantor would be nearly impossible on my nurse's salary in Portland's expensive rental market. Then, Cruz entered the picture. Paige's affair partner, the fitness influencer Wad been making out with her in that viral video, decided he was a victim too. He sent me a message through Instagram demanding that I call him, and when I ignored it, he sent increasingly aggressive follow-ups. Finally, I called him just to make him stop, and he spent 20 minutes yelling at me about how Id ruined his reputation by going to that engagement party and exposing everything. His brand was built on authenticity and integrity, he claimed, and the cheating scandal had cost him sponsorships and followers. He blamed me for going to the party, for confronting Paige publicly, for not just staying quiet and letting the whole situation blow over. Then he threatened to sue me for defamation, claiming Id spread lies about him even though Id never mentioned his name to anyone and had only stated facts about the video. The threat was baseless and would never hold up in court, but it was scary enough to make me consider hiring a lawyer I couldn't afford. I was being attacked from all sides. My parents were threatening my housing and had tried to damage my career. Paige was using her social media platform to destroy my reputation and turn thousands of strangers against me. Cruz was threatening legal action that would cost me money I didn't have to defend against. Even some of my friends started distancing themselves, not wanting to be associated with the drama or choosing to believe Paige's version of events because her story was more compelling than the messy truth. I felt completely isolated, like I was drowning and no one was throwing me a lifeline. The panic attacks started coming regularly, usually late at night when I was alone in my apartment that might not be mine for much longer. I'd wake up gasping for air, my heart racing, my mind spiraling through worst-case scenarios where I lost my job and my home, and everything I'd worked so hard to build. One night, about 3 weeks after the engagement party, I hit my lowest point. I was sitting on my couch in the dark, my phone in my hand, staring at my parents' blocked numbers. I considered unblocking them and calling to apologize, to beg them to stop the attacks, to do whatever they wanted, if it would just make everything go back to normal. I picked up the phone and started to dial. My finger hovered over my mother's number, and I felt tears streaming down my face as I imagined the conversation. I'd apologize for things I didn't do. I'd take responsibility for Paige's choices. I'd go back to being the scapegoat if it meant I could stop being afraid all the time. But then I remembered something Brett had said to me that night. He showed up at my apartment. "You deserve better than this." Those 5 words echoed in my head like a mantra, and I realized he was right. I deserved better than a family that only loved me when I accepted abuse silently. I deserved better than parents who'd weaponize my career and my housing against me. I deserved better than a sister who'd mobilize thousands of strangers to attack me online. I put the phone down without making the call and sat in the darkness until I could breathe normally again. I wouldn't give in. I wouldn't apologize for defending myself. I wouldn't go back to accepting their dysfunction as normal. Whatever happened next, I'd face it standing up, not on my knees begging for scraps of conditional love. The next morning, I made an appointment with a therapist named Dr. Simmons that a coworker had recommended. I'd always been skeptical of therapy, worried it was self-indulgent or unnecessary, but I was drowning and I needed someone to teach me how to swim. Dr. Simmons was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a direct manner that I appreciated immediately. Over our first few sessions, she helped me understand the dynamics I'd been living with my entire life, using terms I'd never heard before: scapegoat, golden child, narcissistic family system. She explained that some families need someone to blame for their dysfunction, someone to carry all the shame and anger that the system generates, and I'd been assigned that role early. Paige had been assigned the role of golden child, the one who could do no wrong, whose image had to be protected at all costs. These roles weren't about who we actually were as people, but about what the family system needed to maintain itself. Understanding this didn't make it hurt less, but it gave me a framework for processing the pain. Dr. Simmons also encouraged me to document everything that was happening, and I started keeping meticulous records. Screenshots of Paige's social media attacks, recordings of threatening voicemails, emails from my landlord about the cosigner situation, the complaint my mother had made to my workplace, crews threatening messages about lawsuits. Everything went into a folder that grew thicker every day. I consulted a lawyer named Roland Patterson, a family law attorney who specialized in harassment cases. Roland reviewed all my documentation and told me I had grounds for harassment claims against both Paige and my parents. He sent cease and desist letters to all of them, formal legal documents that warned them to stop contacting me, stop posting about me online, and stop interfering with my employment or housing. The letters seemed to work, at least temporarily. Paige's posts about me stopped. My parents went silent. Cruz backed off his lawsuit threat. But something else was happening that I didn't expect. Public opinion was starting to shift. Paige's social media attack had been aggressive and sustained, but it was also obviously one-sided and increasingly desperate. Her followers started questioning her story, leaving comments asking why she was so obsessed with attacking her sister, why she couldn't just move on, why she needed to keep dragging this out publicly. One comment that got hundreds of likes said, "This seems really vindictive for someone who claims to be the victim. Why are you posting your sister's high school photos? That's weird." Another said, "I followed you for fitness content, not family drama. This is getting uncomfortable." Some of her remaining followers started unfollowing her, tired of the constant negativity and drama. Her follower count dropped below 25,000, and she lost 2 more brand sponsorships because companies didn't want to be associated with someone who seemed unstable and vindictive. Then people from Paige's past started coming forward. An old friend from high school named Deanna reached out to me through Instagram with a message that said, "I don't know if you remember me, but I was friends with Paige sophomore year, before she destroyed our friendship. I saw what she's been posting about you, and I wanted you to know you're not alone. She did the same thing to me." Deanna told me her story, and it was eerily similar to mine. Paige had befriended her, then stolen her boyfriend, then spread vicious rumors when Deanna confronted her about it. When Deanna tried to defend herself, Paige played the victim so convincingly that their entire friend group turned against Deanna. She'd switched schools her junior year just to escape the situation. "I've wanted to speak up about her for years," Deanna told me, "but I was afraid no one would believe me. Seeing you stand up to her made me realize I could too." Deanna posted her own story on social media, a detailed account of how Paige had treated her in high school, complete with old text messages that showed Paige's cruelty. The post went semi-viral, and other people started commenting with their own stories of how Paige had used them, manipulated them, or betrayed them over the years. Brett messaged me again during this time, apologizing more fully than he had at the engagement party. He explained that he'd been in therapy too, working through his own issues with confrontation and honesty. He told me more about his relationship with Paige, details that made me grateful I'd never had to experience it firsthand. She'd gaslight him constantly, coming home late and lying about where she'd been, then flipping the script when he questioned her and accusing him of being controlling and paranoid. He'd started doubting his own sanity, wondering if he really was too jealous or too suspicious or too demanding. The private investigator footage had confirmed he wasn't crazy, that his instincts had been right all along. He'd posted the video anonymously because he feared Paige would claim he'd fabricated it or edited it somehow, that she'd turn him into the villain if his name was attached to the evidence. He never meant for me to take the blame, and he felt genuinely terrible about it. "I want to make this right," he said. "I'm going to post a public statement clearing your name completely." A few days later, Brett posted on his social media accounts, which he'd kept mostly private but which had connections through his work and social circles. He explained the truth clearly and simply. He'd leaked the video. Natalie had nothing to do with it. Head hired the private investigator. Head kept the evidence for weeks before posting it. He apologized to me publicly and shared some of his own experiences with Pyga's manipulative behavior. The post was shared widely, reaching far beyond his immediate network, and suddenly the narrative was shifting. Paige tried to claim he was lying to get revenge, but too many people had come forward with similar stories about her at this point. Her credibility was shattered. She lost more followers and more sponsorships. Her influencer career, already dying, was essentially dead now. My parents' response to all of this was predictable. They were furious, but not at Paige for causing the situation or at themselves for enabling her. They were furious at me for refusing to sweep everything under the rug, at Brett for exposing the truth, at everyone who was supposedly turning against their family. They blamed me for making private matters public, even though Paige had been the one posting about me for weeks. They blamed Brett for being vindictive, even though Head only posted after Paige's campaign against me had become unbearable. Late one night, about 6 weeks after the engagement party, my mother called me from a number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking, and immediately heard her voice, slurred slightly with alcohol. "Maybe we were too hard on you," she said, and for a moment, my heart leaped with hope. But then she continued. "But you have to understand, Natalie, Paige is sensitive. She's always needed more support, more protection. She's not as strong as you are." The excuses kept coming, the rationalizations for why they'd treated me as less than my entire life. She was admitting fault while simultaneously justifying that fault, acknowledging the problem while refusing to change. I realized with startling clarity that she would never truly change, that she would always prioritize Paige over me, that her apology wasn't really an apology at all. I ended the call and blocked that number too. I was done hoping my parents would see me clearly. I was done waiting for them to choose me. I was building a life where their approval didn't matter anymore, and that life was starting to look pretty good. 3 months after the engagement party disaster, I sat in my new apartment, a smaller place but one that was entirely mine without any co-signers or family connections to threaten my stability. Eid found a new guarantor through a service that specialized in helping renters without family support, and Eid moved in 2 weeks ago. The space was bright and peaceful, and Id decorated it exactly how I wanted without worrying about anyone's opinion. I'd been promoted at work to senior pediatric nurse, a position that came with better pay and more responsibility and recognition that I was good at what I did, regardless of what my family thought. My therapy sessions with Dr. Simmons had become an anchor in my week, a safe space to process decades of dysfunction and learn healthier ways of relating to myself and others. I'd even started dating someone named Graham, a middle school teacher I'd met through my friend Deanna. He was kind and stable and genuinely interested in knowing who I really was, not who my family had decided I should be. Garrett had moved forward with his own plans too. Head dropped out of law school at the end of the semester, and the fallout from our parents had been exactly as bad as Head feared. They'd called him a disappointment, threatened to cut him off financially, and told him he was throwing his life away. But Garrett had stuck to his decision. Head moved in with his girlfriend, enrolled in a graphic design program at Portland Community College, and was already building a portfolio of freelance work. He was happier than I'd ever seen him, lighter somehow, like Head put down a weight he'd been carrying his entire life. We had dinner together every week, sometimes with his girlfriend and Graham, building our own chosen family from people who actually wanted to be in our lives. Paige's situation had gone from bad to worse. Her influencer career had completely tanked. She was down to under 15,000 followers, most of whom seemed to stick around for the drama rather than any genuine interest in her content. Shed had to get a regular job for the first time in years, working retail at a boutique in downtown Portland, which she complained about constantly on her remaining social media presence. She was still dating Cruz, and from what I could see from the outside, they were toxic together, constantly fighting and breaking up and getting back together in an exhausting cycle. Our parents were supporting her financially, paying her rent and her bills, enabling her to avoid taking real responsibility for her choices. My parents had made their own choices clear. They doubled down on supporting Paige, circling the wagons around her like she was the only child who mattered. They occasionally reached out to Garrett and me with superficial text messages, usually around holidays, asking if we were ready to move on and put this behind us without ever actually apologizing or acknowledging what they'd done wrong. Garrett usually ignored them. I responded once with a simple message. I'm willing to have a relationship with you if you're willing to go to family therapy and actually work on these issues. Otherwise, I need to protect my own mental health. They never took me up on the offer. Thanksgiving came, and they invited both Garrett and me to dinner if we were ready to move on and act like family again. We both declined. Instead, Garrett and I hosted our own Thanksgiving at my new apartment with our chosen family, cooking together and laughing and being grateful for the people we'd chosen to support us when everything fell apart. Christmas brought another attempted reconciliation, but this time with conditions that made it clear nothing had really changed. My parents wanted a family meeting at a neutral location to discuss moving forward. I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop in downtown Portland, bringing Garrett with me for support. My parents arrived looking older somehow, more tired, like the weight of maintaining their perfect image was finally taking its toll. We sat at a corner table with overpriced lattes none of us really wanted, and my mother opened with what she probably thought was a reasonable request. We want you both to come back to the family. We miss you, but we need some things from you first. The conditions came out in a list. I needed to apologize to Paige for the engagement party confrontation. I needed to take down any negative posts about the family, even though I hadn't posted anything negative anywhere. I needed to stop telling people about our family issues and pretend that everything was fine. Essentially, they wanted me to go back to being the scapegoat, to accept blame for things I didn't do, to pretend years of mistreatment had never happened. I looked at my parents across that table and felt something shift inside me, something final and irrevocable. No, I said calmly. I'm not going to apologize to Paige for defending myself. I'm not going to pretend that years of favoritism and scapegoating didn't happen. I'm not going to accept being treated as less than anymore. My mother's face went tight with frustration. So, you're choosing to throw away your family over pride? Over not being able to admit when you're wrong? My father leaned forward, his voice low and threatening in the way it had been when I was a child. You're making a mistake, Natalie. Family is everything. You're going to regret this when you're alone. I stood up, and Garrett stood with me. I'm not alone. I have people who love me without conditions. I have people who support me without asking me to pretend I'm someone I'm not. And if choosing those people means I lose you, then that's a choice I can live with. My father's face went red. So you're choosing to destroy this family? I looked at him steadily. No. You made that choice when you decided I was only valuable if I accepted abuse silently. You made that choice when you picked Paige over me again and again. You made that choice when you weaponized my career and my housing against me. I'm just refusing to participate in that dynamic anymore. As Garrett and I walked out of that coffee shop, leaving our parents sitting there in shocked silence, I thought about something Brett had asked me a few weeks earlier. We'd met for coffee as friends, both of us working through the aftermath of our relationships with Paige, and had asked, "Why do you think they treated you that way your whole life? What made you the scapegoat instead of the golden child?" I had an answer now, one I'd learned through therapy and painful self-reflection. Because healthy families don't need a scapegoat, but dysfunctional ones do. They needed someone to blame for their own problems, their own insecurities, their own failures. Paige was the golden child because she reflected what they wanted to be, successful and admired and perfect on the surface. I was the scapegoat because I reminded them of what they feared, imperfection and authenticity and the messy reality underneath the image. Understanding this didn't erase the pain, but it helped me see that their treatment of me was never about my worth as a person. It was about their need to maintain a dysfunctional system, and I'd finally refused to play my assigned role. The healing journey wasn't linear or easy. I still had hard days where I missed the family I'd wished I had, where I grieved the parents who could have been supportive and loving but chose dysfunction instead. I still sometimes doubted myself, wondered if I'd overreacted or if I should have tried harder to make things work. But those moments became less frequent as time went on, replaced by a growing sense of peace and self-acceptance. I started sharing my story anonymously on support forums for people dealing with family scapegoating, and I was shocked by how many people responded with their own similar experiences. I wasn't alone. There were thousands of us out there, people who'd been blamed for family dysfunction, who'd been treated as less than by the people who should have loved them most, who'd finally chosen themselves over toxic family systems. Helping others process their experiences gave my pain a purpose, turned my suffering into something that might prevent someone else from suffering the same way. The lessons I learned through this experience changed me fundamentally. I learned that you can't control how others treat you, only how you respond, and that setting boundaries without guilt was not selfish but necessary for survival. I learned that not all family is blood and not all blood is family, that my chosen family of supportive friends and healthy relationships was more valuable than biological connections built on dysfunction. I learned that you teach people how to treat you, and that by accepting mistreatment for years, it enabled a pattern that would never change unless I forced it to change by walking away. I learned that healing isn't linear, that it'd have good days and bad days, that it'd sometimes miss even the dysfunctional family because at least it was familiar. But I also learned that I wasn't responsible for other people's dysfunction, that my parents' favoritism was their failure and not my fault, that Paige's cruelty was her choice and not something it'd provoked by existing. 1 year after the engagement party, I was having coffee with Garrett at a cafe near my apartment, watching the Portland rain through the window and feeling genuinely content. He asked me a question that made me think, "Do you regret going to that party? If you hadn't shown up, maybe things would have blown over. Maybe you'd still have a relationship with mom and dad." I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I don't regret it, because staying silent and invisible was killing me slowly. Every time I accepted blame I didn't deserve, every time I swallowed my truth to keep the peace, I was dying a little bit inside. That night at the engagement party, I chose myself for the first time in my life. I chose honesty over harmony. I chose authenticity over acceptance, and that changed everything. Garrett smiled and raised his coffee cup. To choosing ourselves. I clinked my cup against his. To choosing ourselves. I realized something important in that moment, something Dr. Simmons had been trying to teach me for months. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Walking away from toxic family isn't giving up, or being selfish or failing at relationships. It's giving yourself the love and respect they couldn't or wouldn't provide. It's recognizing that you deserve better than conditional acceptance based on your willingness to accept abuse. It's understanding that peace is more valuable than proximity, that distance from toxicity is healthier than closeness to dysfunction. I wasn't the villain they'd made me out to be, the jealous sister who couldn't stand to see Paige happy, but I also wasn't perfect. I'd made mistakes, said things in anger, handled situations imperfectly. I was just a woman who'd finally learned that she deserved better than a lifetime of scapegoating, who'd chosen self-respect over family approval, who'd decided that her mental health and happiness mattered more than maintaining a dysfunctional system that required her suffering to function. My relationship with my parents remains complicated and distant. I don't know if we'll ever have a real reconciliation, the kind that involves genuine apologies and changed behavior and family therapy. I've left the door open for that possibility, because I believe people can change if they want to, but I'm not holding my breath waiting for it to happen. I've accepted that they might never acknowledge the harm they caused, that they might go to their graves believing I was the problem and they were innocent victims of my unreasonable behavior. And I've made peace with that because their version of events doesn't define my reality. I know what happened, I know who I am, I know what I deserve, and that knowledge is enough. I've built a beautiful life without their approval, a life full of genuine relationships and meaningful work and personal growth. I'm dating Graham seriously now, and he's met my chosen family and fits into it perfectly. We're talking about moving in together next year. I'm genuinely happy in a way I never was when I was trying to earn my parents' love. The final lesson, the one that took me the longest to learn, is this. You are not responsible for other people's dysfunction. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are not obligated to accept abuse in the name of family loyalty. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're related to you, even if society tells you that family is everything. Because family should be a safe place, a source of support and unconditional love, and when it becomes a source of pain and toxicity instead, you have every right to protect yourself by leaving. That doesn't make you a bad person. That makes you a person who values yourself enough to demand better. And that lesson, as painful as it was to learn, was worth every difficult moment that brought me here. So when people ask me if I regret standing up to my family at that engagement party, if I wish I'd just stayed quiet and kept the peace, I tell them the truth. That night changed my life, but not in the way anyone expected. It didn't destroy my family because my family was already broken. It just exposed the brokenness that had always been there, hidden under a veneer of respectability and fake perfection. It forced me to choose between continuing to play a role that was killing me or stepping into my own truth, even though it cost me everything familiar. I chose truth. I chose myself. And I would make that same choice again every single time, because the life I have now, the authentic life built on genuine relationships and self-respect, is worth more than 1,000 fake family dinners where I smile and pretend everything is fine while dying inside. That's the real story of how my parents uninvited me from an engagement party for embarrassing my sister, and how that one act of standing up for myself became the catalyst for completely transforming my life. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your own family? Have you had to choose between family loyalty and your own mental health? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because your story matters, and you're not alone in this struggle. If this story resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more stories about setting boundaries, choosing yourself, and surviving family dysfunction. Share this video with someone who might need the reminder that they deserve better than conditional love. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you feel less alone in yours. Remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. You deserve relationships that don't require you to diminish yourself to fit in. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions. And you deserve peace, even if finding it means walking away from people who are supposed to love you most. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.